In this lecture, I'd like to show you one more way to create objects in JavaScript. And it's a very common way, especially if you have functionality together with those objects, very similar to like a Java class, for example. Right now, I am in script.js and I am located in the lecture 48 folder. So let me go ahead and close the file explorer. Before we jump into yet another way how to create objects in JavaScript, I'd like to explore one particular topic. Let's go ahead and write a function, and we'll call this function, let's say, test. And all we'll do this function is do console.log, and we'll say hello Coursera. Okay, so if we save that now, well, nothing's going to happen. We actually have to call that function. So let's go ahead and call the function test. And now we see hello Coursera. Now, we discussed in one of the previous lectures as to what happens when you actually invoke a function. We discussed the fact that a new execution context is created within which this line or whatever is inside the function is actually executed. And we also discussed the fact that that execution context gets a special variable called this. Let's find out what this variable is pointing to. Let's do a console.log. Truth is, we could just delete this and just put it right here. And let's log what this is at this point, this special variable. Let's go ahead and save that. And this is pointing to the global window object, right? That's the object that has all of these parameters, all of these properties. And in fact, if I actually set a property on this object, say this dot my name, give it Yaakov. So if I save that, and if I output this again, and in fact I could do it right here, I could say this or window dot my name, and I could log that out, console.log, and it will say Yaakov, because what I did here is, since this is pointing to the global object, window.myname or my name property was created on the window object. Okay, so that's all nice and well, but if we actually wanted to kind of encapsulate some data within a particular object and use a function for it, then we would need this to point to something else. And this is where function constructors come in. Let's go ahead and erase that and create yet another function. Let's just say function constructors. Okay, so let's create another function, and let's call this function circle. We're going to create circles, and this time we're going to say circle with capital C. Now, there's really nothing about capital C that does anything special other than it lets me know that it's a function constructor. So it's basically just a convention to let other developers know that this is a function constructor as opposed to a regular function. And a circle should have a radius. And what I'm going to do inside the body of the circle is actually nothing more than just say console.log, and I'll go ahead and log this. And here comes yet another way that we're about to learn as to how to create objects. Let's go ahead and create a variable called myCircle. And what I'm going to do is, instead of just invoking the function circle, I'm going to use the new keyword and then say circle and give it, let's say, 10 as the radius. When I invoke a function together with the new keyword, the JavaScript engine makes this point to the object itself that got created, which is the circle. So if I go ahead and console.log the actual myCircle, and so now I'm going to console.log this, and I'm also going to console.log myCircle. It really should be the same thing. Let's go ahead and do that. And then both are empty objects that are of type circle, or sort of type circle. It's not a real type, but it's an object with a name circle. So this means that technically what I could do here is I could say this dot radius, so I could create a sort of a member variable or a property of this circle object, and I could say radius. So now the radius that I'm creating the circle with is going to be stored as part of my object. So if I go ahead and log the circle now, you'll see that now I am a circle that has a radius property of 10. Now what's really going on behind the scenes here is that this line right here is really pretty much equivalent to saying new object, as we've done before. And then that object gets named after the function that created it. So it's really a function constructor in that it creates a new object by executing this function in a special way using this special new keyword. Now the function constructor itself, or the function circle, cannot return anything. So if the function returns, let's say, an empty object, an empty literal, and I'll save that, you'll see that we're not really getting the behavior we want. My circle is now just an empty object. So we can't return anything from the function constructor. It has to remain without a return value. And the new keyword will arrange for us that when it creates an empty object and then sets it to be a circle, it will go ahead and return that object and store it in whatever variable that we're providing for it. So let's save it again. Now we see our circle with the radius 10. Now, what would be an object without some methods? And methods in JavaScript are just functions that are set on properties of objects. So let's go ahead and create one. Let's go ahead and create a this.getArea, and this.getArea is going to be nothing more than a function. And let's go ahead and put this function on a separate line. And the function is going to have no arguments because we're actually going to get at the radius using the this keyword. So we're going to go ahead and have curly braces. Won't forget to say a semicolon here because this is just an expression that gets set to the getArea variable. And here we can use a JavaScript predefined object that actually has been pretty much created the same way that we're creating our circle. So we'll say math.py times, and there's another math method that's called POW, power of our this.radius, and we wanted to raise it to the power of 2. And we'll go ahead and put a semicolon after that. Okay, so now we have a getArea method or getArea function that will calculate the area of the circle. So here we created a circle with a radius 10, and we're outputting the circle. Let's go ahead and output myCircle.getArea. And we need to put parentheses after it because this is the function and we're invoking it. So now that we save it, we could see that the area is been calculated. So 10 to the second power, so 100 times pi sounds about right. Let's go ahead and take a little bit of a closer look to this myCircle object that gets created. Let's go ahead and log it one more time. And you see my circle object has a radius of 10. And if we open it up, we'll see the radius is 10 and has another property called getArea. And the value of getArea is a function. The problem is, as we keep creating these circle objects over and over in our code, we're going to keep creating this getArea function over and over in our code because every time we say new, this entire thing gets created. While for radius, it's perfectly normal because each circle should have its own radius. We really don't need for a type circle to have its own getArea on every object it creates. It really should be just created once, and all the circles, all the instances of a circle should share it. And the way we could do that is by using a special property called prototype. So let's go ahead and cut this out of here. And we'll say circle.prototype.getArea, and that is what is going to be equal to our function. And the function is going to be anonymous since we already have the name getArea right here. And again, we don't need an argument because we're going to use this keyword. And the body, we're going to say math.py times math power of this.radius to the second power. So that is actually what we need to return. Okay, so there's our getArea. So let's go ahead and before we even call getArea ourselves, let's go ahead and take a look at myCircle object one more time. Let's go ahead and save this. It output in myCircle object, and we'll take a look, and you can see that the radius is here. The radius equals 10, but the getArea doesn't exist here. Well, where is it? Well, it's actually sitting inside of the special variable __ proto __. That's a special property. If we open that up, you'll see that getArea now is right here. And proto is something that's going to be existent on every single instance of this object. So if we, for example, create another one, var my other circle, and we'll say new circle, and we'll give it 20 as the radius. And we'll go ahead and console.log my other circle. You'll see that the radius here is 10, and there's no getArea, and the radius here is 20, and again, both of them are pointing to the same proto variable that have a getArea, and this getArea is actually the same location in memory as this getArea. It's the same thing, so it doesn't get recreated over and over. Now, a couple of words of caution. Number one is circle.prototype.getArea is not something you should cut and put inside this function. You could certainly do that, but that would be a mistake. And the reason that would be a mistake is because this function is going to get executed every single time you create a new circle. Well, every single time you don't need to define a prototype. In other words, what you'll be doing is you'll be overriding the memory space of getArea every single time you create a new circle. So basically that's wasted processing. It's not really wasted memory space since it's going to put in the same memory space this function over and over again, but it's wasted processing. So you really should not be putting that inside of a function constructor. So definitely put this outside. Let's go ahead and indent it this way. So that's caution number one. Caution number two is make sure you don't forget the new keyword, because if you omit the new keyword, let's go ahead and comment this out. Let's go ahead and log this variable. You'll see it's undefined. Well, the reason it's undefined is because this is nothing more than a function. It's just a regular JavaScript function. So a regular JavaScript function that you're passing 10 to and actually does not return anything. Well, when it doesn't return anything, this my circle becomes undefined. And if you actually try to say that getArea, right, we're going to get an error because it says cannot read property getArea of undefined, because my circle at this point is undefined. So make sure you remember to put the new keyword there. One clue is to always make the function constructor names capitalized. That's why you'll remember that this is not just a regular function, it's actually a function constructor, and you must use it with the keyword new. Okay, so let's uncomment this back out and save it, and now everything works as we expected. So these are function constructors. You could create an object using them using the keyword new, and you could set a prototype property on that function such that whatever property you just set on it will only be created once and will not be created for every single instance of that object.